evening forward. Thank you.
And thank you, Crossword, for organizing this. It's always a pleasure to chat with you, Nandita, and particularly on public forums, because there's so much that I keep discovering myself, even though I know you rather well. And nonetheless, there are dimensions to you which keep evolving, and I'm sure that this event is also going to reveal to us some of the new thoughts that you will share with us. Manto is generally regarded as perhaps one of the finest short story writers of this subcontinent. And the beauty about him, which Nandita will, of course, throw more light on, is that the raw honesty with which he wrote against his stories against the backdrop of partition and the kind of tumultuous, almost cataclysmic upheavals which were going on there, bringing out hidden demons in people, hidden unexpected heroism in people, martyrdom, psychosis. I mean, through these personal stories, we got a sense of the kind of massive historical wound that was inflicted on the subcontinent. And yet the beauty of Manto was that he was always dispassionate, always in that sense neutral about the way he wrote. He treated every character as a human being, regardless of which side of the border he or she came from, regardless of what the religious identity was. And that is something which, as powerfully, has seldom been replicated. So I'm going to turn to Nandita, who's going to tell us much more about this hugely interesting, sensitive, troubled personality that she has made her almost life's mission over the last decade for. And then I also want to talk about her experience of working on the film, of discovering Manto, creating a story out of a biopic, and then eventually this book, which also is as massive an effort almost. I mean, I was reading through it, I was almost overwhelmed by the amount of work that has gone into the film and into the book by itself. So I think we're going to have a rather vigorous conversation here, Nandita. So the question that, of course, you've been asked about 1,862 times, and I'm going to ask that question to you again.
Okay? Why Manto, is it?
Exactly. So let's hear it from you.
Is it working?
Yeah, it's working.
Oh, okay. See, I could predict the question. So first, thank you, Anjum, for doing this for the nth time probably. You've done a couple of conversations. He's also a teacher in film schools, so I've also done it for his students. But yes, every time, and I somehow don't seem to tire talking about Manto. You know, sometimes people say it's been too long, since 2012. I mean, aren't you tired? Now get on with other things. And I will get on with other things. But I think for me, Manto is not just the man, the writer. It kind of is an idea. He represents something that's why I say Mantoyat, which Harshal also mentioned. It's that amazing will to be sort of just truthful and courageous and free-spirited. He denotes all of that. That, I think, for me, resonated so deeply. That was one of the first reasons why I decided to do the film on Manto. Of course, I knew about him. In college, I had read, that's the first time I read, and I'd read some short stories. But I didn't know he used to write essays and biographical sketches and radio plays, and all of that came out in 2012, his centenary celebration year, where a lot more people wrote about him. And I started reading not as a filmmaker, but just somebody who was interested in that time, this man, how he had stuck his neck out, how he was so compelled to tell the truth at the cost of his family, at the cost of his own well-being, how he was a loner. And there was something about it that just felt like I could respond to today without being didactic. I could almost take refuge in Manto and respond to today. Because, you know, what was happening around me, and actually Manto's relevance has only grown since 2012, I would say. But I was itching to respond to what was happening around me, but to find that right story that would not have more shutters down, that would not polarize the conversation further. And I felt telling Manto's story provided me that opportunity, that I could talk about something that happened 70 years ago, and yet we would be able to see that we haven't learned anything from history.
Sorry to interrupt you, because you were getting at something. You had done your you had a certain sense of Manto, you had a sense of the history of
Mm.
those times, and that is what spoke with you. And yet, when you are actually developing a relationship with your subject, okay,
Right.
which is what I mean, we do. It sounds all rather mystical and mad sometimes, but there is actually we're having conversations with those
Absolutely.
people. We actually transport ourselves in our imagination to those times,
Yes.
and almost asking permission of the actor that of the character that I'll accompany you. I will not be intrusive, but I just
Right.
want to be with you, because you begin to get a sense of the rhythm, the way the person walks, the way the person feels, his silences, etc. What is it that you discovered about Banto the man? I understand his
Yeah.
work, I understand his identity
Mm.
issues, his fights. What is it? Can you bring out something which really made you feel that apart from what he did, he was also a very interesting person?
Interesting and full of contradictions. Now, how do you tell a story in 2 hours? A man full of contradictions. I mean, mainly our mainstream cinema has a very black and white identification, right? It's easier to say this is a good character, this is a bad character. Your protagonist smokes, your protagonist drinks, your protagonist is rude, blunt to the point of being rude. He's everything that he does, he loves his family, but everything that he does jeopardizes the well-being of his family. Yet you're supposed to love that man. You're supposed to really like this, right? And I want you to. But I don't want to put him on a pedestal. I want his, he's fallible. And I want to show that because that's how he would have wanted also. Of course, I would have wanted, but, I think he would have wanted too. For him, it was more important to show reality as is than to try to embellish it or beautify it. He's written tons about it. There's something called Manto's prayer, which is, what his admirers have called it, like a Manto prayer, which is all about that how he'd rather go with stagnant water than the flowing water. He'd rather go with ugliness than beauty, things like that. It's a beautiful passage. So I think for me, once, like you said, once you become part of that world, you feel you know those characters, then you can also take liberties, because everything that then you take liberties with is kind of rooted in facts. So obviously, I don't know what he and his wife spoke in their bedroom, and there were scenes in their bedroom or in their house. What happened when Gandhiji was killed? I don't know how Manto reacted, because he's never really written. But I felt that scene was also important in what we are going through today, and a reminder of sorts. So there were many things that I took the liberty with, but somehow I started feeling, and maybe I'm presumptuous, but I started feeling like I know Manto. Now that I know Manto, I can get his permission to take these liberties. I also met the family in Lahore who told me lots of stories, not just in building Manto's character, but also Safia's, because Safia wasn't really known. I mean, if had she not been Safia Manto, we wouldn't have really known her. And the family also would always say she was very sweet, very supportive, very gentle, very soft spoken. But that doesn't make for an interesting character. And also, it didn't seem real enough. Like a woman who has to go through, living with a man like this, life couldn't have been easy. So, what was she feeling? Can I give words to those feelings and just make her a little feistier, make her articulate those feelings? And I think those liberties can only be taken if you have done enough of your homework and enough research to be able to fly and take that, because otherwise you can't खिलवाड़ नहीं कर सकते आप history के साथ. And also I'd become very close to the family, so I felt an extra sense of responsibility, because when you know someone, you're doing a film about their parents. I mean, how would I feel if my parents were represented by someone unknown comes in and wants to paint them in a certain way? And in fact, I called the daughters for the Bombay premiere, and I was wondering, how would they react, especially to Safia's character? Had I made her too feisty? Had I given her more agency than they had told me? And they were actually very, very moved by that, because I'm sure they felt her pain, but somehow nobody had articulated it, because she was this amazing woman who had very happily suffered this man who was a great man. Because now everyone was talking suddenly about Manto, especially after 2012, when even in Pakistan he was given the highest civilian award. Till then, they had a fairly uncomfortable relationship with Manto, in accepting Manto. So there were all these reasons which actually kept me very rooted to facts. Almost 80% of the dialogues are of Manto. Even other characters are speaking things from his writing. But that was a very challenging thing. Kahin kisi kahani se lekar, you make another character speak. Something that Manto had spoken at Jogeshwari College in Bombay, you take those things. So just putting it together in a comprehensive, in a way that you can communicate, that was really honestly the biggest challenge to write. And you're a script writer, you know the challenges that sometimes you have so much material you don't even know what to keep and what to leave, because you also start falling in love with that material.
It's true. I mean, the word liberty that Nandita mentioned, it's not a bad word. Generally, when people, as she said, do khilwad, when they twist the truth of the character's life, of the person's life around, just merely to create some formula drama, that is what we object to. So generally, the whole relationship that a biopic has to facts is that it's not necessary that what she is showing in the Manto film happened exactly like that. I mean, that this happened in this place on this date at this time. But the question to be asked of Manto is that if something like this had happened, is this how you would have reacted? And it is that's the liberty that we take, that a writer and a filmmaker is allowed to maneuver the circumstances as long as that helps to bring out the hidden responses, the hidden personality of the character. And this is what I meant by saying truth, because truth is something which in stories is always a hidden thing, and that's the struggle of the writer to try bringing that out.
There's an example that comes to my mind. For instance, Manto didn't want to go to Pakistan. He was very sure that he was never going to go. Now, how do you bring that out that he was very sure? So, of course, when in a party, there's a Independence Day party, and Jaddan Bhai asks him कि बहुत लोग कह रहे हैं आप पाकिस्तान नहीं जा रहे हैं. So he said, हाँ, अगर बम्बई वहाँ चला जाए तो हो सकता है उसके पीछे पीछे मैं भी चल पड़ूँ. So he says that. Now you say, okay, it's in jest. But there's a scene where he's looking at the Independence Day celebration and his wife is pregnant and he just touches the tummy and he says कि ये आज़ाद हिंदुस्तान में पैदा होगा. So the surety with which he says, which means it is going to be born here because I'm not going to go. Now, obviously, I don't know whether he ever said that, what did he say, etc. But you take that little liberty. So it shows you that he has no plans of going there. And then it's the turn of events that kind of pushes him, because he was also a very deeply sensitive person. And I think when the sense of betrayal is a feeling. Now, I don't think Shyam really, for those of you who have seen, his friend who he thinks betrayed, probably he didn't. Maybe it was a moment of anger that he said. How many of you have seen, just so that I know how I'm saying? Okay, thank you, a lot of you have. So, so there is this scene where he feels that his friend is betrayed because of the religion and because he sees him suddenly as a Muslim, and that identity actually has played no role in his life, because he never, that's not one of his identities, that's his main identity. And yet his friend has seen him like that. And later on there's a scene, which is a fictional scene, where Safiya says that गुस्से में तो हर कोई कुछ कह देता है. In anger one does say things. And she basically means you're a writer, you should be knowing. And he says कि उसने जो कहा उससे, I'm not worried about, it's not that's bothering me. मैं भी ऐसा कर सकता हूँ, मैं भी ऐसा कह सकता हूँ. Because we are all capable of bringing out our prejudices in moments of stress or moments of strife. But what really troubled him was that a human being can do this, is capable of this. That is what really bothered him. And I think those were the questions. There were times when people have congratulated me for quoting something from Manto, in the sense that it's not even Manto's line, let's say it's my line. And they said, हाँ वो मंटो का बहुत अच्छा आपने वो इस्तेमाल किया. मैंने कहा sorry, I take it as a compliment. वैसे वो मेरी line थी. So अब तो the line between fact and fiction also in the film, for me, has also blurred so much, having done many drafts of the script.
It's also a return thing. I mean, every time that she's been asked, and I'm truly expressing my gratitude in public, Nandita, that every time I've asked her for a cause, whether it's the Screenwriters Association or film schools or a conference or the Litvv, etc., wherever it is that I have been involved, and I've asked her if she can come, she has always come. So which is what keeps things sort of rolling. Now, one last question. Again, a delicate question, but see how directly you can...
I'll do it.
Yeah.
We have... और बढ़ गई है film के बाद. पहले भी
even
थोड़ी
since
थी.
the time that you scripted the film to now, it's not been very long, and yet a lot has happened around us. today, if you were to actually were to be scripting this for the first time, is there anything that you believe would have changed in the film? Anything that would have been emphasized, the proportioning? What is it that would have been done
I
differently?
think many things would have been done differently, only because when you revisit anything, you want to do it differently. Also, you are a person, right? I'm not the same person I was in 2012 or in 2008. I mean, when I see even my own journey, I started with street theatre in Safdar Hashmi's time, right? So this was, and I remember going to for every march, shouting slogans, being an angry person, and justifying my anger because it was against injustice. You're supposed to be angry. I'm not so angry as a person. You know, that doesn't mean I don't care about the injustices, but my approach is maybe different. I want to engage more. You know, even when I did Firak, I could have done a very blame game kind of a thing. I could have done it during the violence. I could have shown much more of the violence. But what interests me more is what lingers on when violence finishes. What interests me is that how do people live in fear? For us to be able to feel the fear that the characters feel. So it's, in a way, there are subtler emotions, and it's, you know, to understand prejudice and these human emotions, guilt. And so even in Firak, it was more a representation of emotions that people were feeling, as opposed to, you know, just saying, okay, how many Hindu characters am I going to take? How many Muslim characters? Whom am I going to show in good light and bad light? I did no balancing. It's also, when you haven't really studied cinema, I've not been as fortunate to be your student or assisted anybody, you also don't know the grammar. I ended up writing both the scripts out of not knowing, and there is an advantage to that. Of course, there is a disadvantage to that as well. So I think I would change. I don't know. I mean, I'm a different person today. It would be difficult if I had to, like, now I'm itching to actually do something which is subtle and all of that, but also something that doesn't need to take refuge in history. Like something that's maybe present, something that's maybe future, but you know, I'd feel like we haven't learned from the past, and I don't know how much we are going to learn. And it's just that I'm feeling, I'm in that state. So obviously, how you feel inside and how troubled you are continues. Like, I never thought that Manto would be seen as Firak and Manto. A lot of people say that it feels like you're heading to a trilogy because, you know, there is a connection between Firak and Manto, but it wasn't conscious. But those issues that I've tried to deal with in Firak haven't changed. What do? Your concerns are going to remain the same because the world around you is the same. And I just want to add something about the end. What you said about good, feeling good, you know, how do you end a film? That's something I've struggled with both in Firak and in Manto. That how do you end? Do you end on an optimistic note? Do you tell people that, yeah, everything's going to be fine? But I don't believe that sometimes, and oftentimes, unfortunately. At the same time, I am an optimist because I do believe that pessimism is for the lazy. You know, cynicism has never moved things. You've got to be hopeful. So it's not so binary as pessimism or being optimistic. You want to leave the audience with a question. You want to leave the audience with some disturbance, as you said, or you want to leave the audience in wanting to do something with it. And again, it wasn't decided, but both in Firak and Manto, they look into camera. And you know, when I was doing Manto, again, that wasn't. In fact, in Firak's script, it's not even there that the child looks into camera at the end. I don't know if you've seen. Firak is also online and for free on YouTube. And I have no shame in these pirated ones, whoever has done it. But so Firak also, the child looks into the camera, almost asking us that, is this the world you want to leave me with? And in Manto as well, Manto looks into the camera to almost say, who's more insane, those in the asylum or the world outside? And I've ended with Faiz's poetry, Bol ke lab azad hai tere, bol zuban ab tak teri hai, which is almost a call to action. So maybe me, and like my intent behind it is what I'm actually leaving the audience with. It's neither pessimism nor optimism, but come on now, take the legacy of Manto and run with it. You know, bring out your Mantoyat, which we all have. So that's the tone and that's the note that I decided to leave the film with.
Excellent. I'm going to throw it open in case
Thank
you
you.
people have some question that you may want to ask. Yeah, Harshil, You have mic. Yeah.
Just about the poster of the movie.
If you, sir, if you can also tell me your name, I mean,
Yeah,
before
I'm
you ask.
Nilesh, Steinbander. So I saw the movie on Netflix.
Okay.
Because nowadays theaters, it doesn't stay for long. So I saw it on Netflix. Yeah. So just
I've
about
complained. That's the only place where I've
two
complained. a little.
questions. So one is about the poster, the red, this thing. Is it blood or something else?
Well, it's more
across
a
the face?
banning sign when you yahan
Okay.
nahi hai, but yes, it's a sign of, you know, when you ban, you want to silence somebody, you want to cross them out, and but he still keeps looking because he's not going to be crossed out so soon. So that was the
The
idea.
other one, was there any scene censored by the board?
Well, I had a 2.5 hour conversation with the censor board. And at one point, I told them, I said, I feel like Manto, what he must have been in the witness box trying to argue his own case. And I said, and some of the words that they objected to were from Manto's writings. And I said, my God, 70 years later, I have to still fight for it. They're not even my words. These are words that he has used. And they had a list of 22 things. So after we fought, there were only 5 audio cuts. And I really see that as a victory. And I see that. And they all individually loved the film. See, that also makes a difference. We are first human beings, then our respective professions. In fact, I was sitting outside and one of them came out and he was going to the loo and he was so moved by it that he just said, thank you, thank you. I was like, okay, that's a good sign. And then when I went in, and they were all trying to be professional, it was wonderful to see that they actually were moved, but they felt like, no, we have to do our job. And I told them, I said, you know, it's okay to be vulnerable. I know you're the censor board, and I won't take advantage of your vulnerability, but if you're moved, you can stay with that emotion. It's not such a bad thing, because we are first all human beings. And then we had this wonderful conversation, actually, and there were these 5 words that they said that you replace it. I said, I'm sorry, I'm not going to replace it, I'm going to mute it. Let the audience know that something has been censored. So I didn't replace it with anything, those audio cuts I did, but visually they didn't cut anything. And I was also in some ways...
those 5 words.
अब मैं बोलूँगी तो यहाँ पीप पीप वो जो भी है कैमरा उसमें हो जाएगा. But even things like हरामजादी and all that, I was like, कितनी फिल्मों में इससे, I mean, that is the arbitrary nature of censorship. You know, how do you, it has to be in a context. That so many horrendous things we see with U certificate, I got a UA, with U certificate we see, which is very regressive, which is, you know, objectifying women, denigrating things, is really messing up with the mind. I mean, those kind of things get passed. So it's so arbitrary. It's not about these people. They were good people. But it's just the arbitrary nature of censor board where 5 people are going to decide for a 1.3 billion people as to what they should watch.
Then I think you should pursue it. Yeah.
That's also true.
Yeah.
See,
So,
both are true.
Thank you very much. You've been a
Thank you.
wonderfully
You've been an
attentive
amazing audience,
and
yeah.
you are
And you are fantastic.
Yes,
Thank you
yes,
so much
yes,
for
yes, yes.
doing this.
Wonderful.
Thank
Should
you.
we be releasing the book?
Yeah, sure.
No? What,
Yes, yes,
show
yes.
me. You don't mind if we do it, like
Yes,
it's
we wouldn't mind. वो रखिए आपके लिए ही.
आप ही कर दीजिए, चलिए. दिखाई दे किताब, जैसे कि यहाँ दिख रही है. ये है किताब, and just to show you a little bit. So by the way, I've dedicated it to the Mantos of the world. क्योंकि बहुत सारे मंटो अभी भी हैं, हम उन्हें ज़रा बचाएं, बहुतों को खो चुके हैं. So it's basically, it's got lots of, you know, photographs, stories. It's really the pictures and the images. Aditya Verma, the photographer, और हमारे phones के भी बहुत सारे photos हैं, रेकी, किस जगह में हमने shoot किया, वगैरह वगैरह वगैरह.
बहुत ही खूबसूरत किताब है, अगर आपकी इच्छा हो.
कुछ discount दे